He's not.
Peter is not here, he asked us to not discuss his application.
It might not be that long.
Have you ever seen styles that you
Very fast, maybe.
set into a wall?
So Kathleen, this is 16 stone?
Yeah, it's Alice
It is.
Lennon. 16 stone.
16 stone.
Actually, you know
What do
what?
you get?
Trade that back because that's the one that's stamped.
You don't get
Could you
that.
push that for the short person?
No stamps for you.
So Travis's referral is here in the folder.
Oh, no.
Wrong project? Just kidding. Alright.
Wing it. Like, this is very clear.
You like that creative use of Bluebeam PDF editor? I had a 20-something in my office do that.
What could go
Make
wrong?
me look good, man.
I'm more of like a cut stuff out on other paper and then put it on the printout.
Oh,
in the-
this?
in
This
the-
looks fine
in
to
the
me.
copier,
I'm-
and then more of like a decoupage type of a
It's also
kind of
more.
level PDF editor.
I like it.
There it is, okay.
Talk us through it.
So
Oh, it's a
I
clear glass wall, huh?
I would love to build a brick wall between these two brick houses. Right now, there is a sort of hodgepodge of metally kind of different gardening type stuff there.
What's the pipe?
My neighbor has a gorgeous garden, but I've heard through the rumor mill that they're gonna potentially do some redecorating back there. So I've been wanting to do this wall for a while, and I've been collecting bricks from all over the Hudson Valley, and I think I have just enough antique brick to do it. So I thought now's the time when their sort of backyard landscape is in flux and I won't be disturbing them to try to see if I can make this happen. I have a fence on the other side, which I did with my other neighbor last year, which matches
Right.
their existing fence.
Yeah.
But this, because of the way Stone Street works, all the levels are a bit different. And I really think it would be awkward to have a wooden fence here that is matching the other wooden fence, but it's at such a different level. The two things seem so disconnected. And the fact that these houses are sort of, there's no Flemish bond, but they are connected historically and not, if not, like, you know, actually physically. And I thought just to use the same material, simple, it's relatively elegant in its simplicity. And I made sure to get all bricks from Pleasant River Valley, all reclaimed from a church out in the River.
Wow.
Amazing.
So, just a lot of
You
trips.
didn't steal them from the
Just a
foundry?
lot of trips over the Buford Beacon Bridge with like zero shock absorption on my 04 pickup truck.
Oh.
But, you know, but that being said, you know, if you guys don't think it's good, I'll use it for something else.
No, I don't want any of the bricks.
What's the, just because I'm curious, it looks like a drain pipe.
Yeah, so because Stone Street is so awkwardly pitched,
Uh-huh.
that leader
It
pipe
dumps into
that
it.
leader pipe when I moved in was actually just like draining right into my neighbor's sort of like patio brick, like the backyard
Oh,
area,
it's a
and it was like washing out.
Wait, I'm sorry.
So
This is a pipe?
So the leader pipe
Yeah?
here, yeah, so it's a long leader pipe.
Yeah, if
so,
you look on the
yeah,
long
Oh,
picture.
I
so if you
thought
look
it
at the
was-
back of
I
14
thought it was
Stone there,
concrete.
that was just like it was like their backyard was like an iceberg.
So what
Wow.
has changed that has something changed that you don't need to have, or does the wall incorporate that?
Oh yeah, I'm just gonna I'll funnel that back out to the yard. It's just dumping into the yard now, away from the back of their house. So my whole goal there was just to keep their water. So I'll run that down the side of the yard. Into the
No, you
same
wanted
place.
away from your house too, because
Yeah.
there was.
You know something? Even if it goes hard, the way Stone Street is, it's actually it's very deceiving when you look at it, but when you get a view from when you walk the yards, you see how
How it steps
drastic
down.
the change is. So it was just running right in the back of their place.
Well,
This is,
ultimately, where would you take it to the same place?
You know,
Or-
ultimately, I'm hoping to do a raised bed against that wall. So I'm hoping that raised bed, a garden, will absorb all that water.
Hmm.
Right now, it just goes out to, I dug a little hole, put some gravel in it,
Convenient.
something in there, got as far away from the houses as possible.
So it's reclaimed red brick, and on the top you got that soldier course,
Exactly.
and so you see but it's like full soldiers on one side and
You
like.
know what it's gonna be? It's actually gonna be, like, you're exactly right, it's actually gonna be like an uneven zipper pattern.
Oh, got it, yeah,
Yeah.
the halves and the holes and the.
Yeah, but I'm
yeah.
gonna alternate it because I felt like if I did the two full bricks, 16 inches is so out of scale with like everything else, even the scale.
No,
of
I'm not
the
talking about the
house.
width of it, I'm just talking about what the pattern would
No, no,
end up.
exactly.
I was thinking is it just halves on one side and holes
No,
on
no,
the other.
I'll interweave it so it's
Yeah.
equidistant.
And, okay, but so there's no like capstone or anything on top?
You know, I looked around the village. I know the La Bouchon has that really nice kind of swooping. So it's a lot more built up than our wall. And then the people on Fair, they have a little more brickwork in the backyard. I looked around. I was looking around Fair. I was looking around
I was
Garden.
just trying to think of one, the Joe, former planning board guy, next to the
Barbara.
library, Barbaro,
Yeah.
has a, it's got,
Wrought iron on
what's
the
it got, it's got wrought iron on the top, it doesn't have a cap.
There's no
No,
cap.
because
No.
it's wrought iron on the top.
Yeah. So
I
here,
just couldn't remember if something went down.
and honestly,
there.
based on these two houses, there's not. I mean, there's lentils and there's stone. There's not. It's not. There's not a lot of
Yeah, okay.
decoration
Yeah,
really.
no,
you know,
Well, I
it's-
mean,
And,
these are,
and it, you know, in the backyard, those are very simple facade.
Yeah,
Very.
and even the front too. So I just think, you know, to add anything decorative, it feels a little much.
And what say you, neighbor? Neighbors?
Yeah, I mean, if you're just looking at the backs of the houses, there's no ornamental cap
No.
in the architecture, so.
and it's low enough that somewhere in your packet you have a photo of, from Cross
Oh
Street.
yeah, I'm. It's getting.
Yeah,
low
so it's
back
not
there.
gonna block, it's not blocking,
Mhm.
that's one of the things that makes that block so special, that you can
Yeah, that's
see
great.
across the yards,
Look
and you
all
get the
stuff
sense of the, you know, all the neighbors' kitchen gardens.
Mm, True.
So keeping it low allows that view to be maintained. I think it's actually, a really cool idea to be using reclaimed brick in this.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of all brick houses in
no,
the village.
totally. It seems so odd, right? But there aren't a lot.
I know, we had a
Especially
brickyard
considering the fact
here.
that they're making bricks right here.
Yeah.
So it seems to me a cool new use. So it doesn't connect to the house at all, right? It's freestanding.
What's the correct answer here?
Well, it looks, your 20-year-old made it look like it is not
Yeah, okay.
connected to the house.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, obviously structurally, if I could key in the end of that, I mean, it would be probably better, I suppose. But I mean, I'm not looking to add on. I'm not looking to extend my house.
Maybe you should leave a gap. I'm just thinking, I mean, you're in the construction trade, so you know way more than I know, but I was just thinking about like attaching it to your house, like what if there's a frost heave or any little bit of moisture that gets in there, it could damage the.
Not a good point.
Well, that and also your footing only goes down 2 feet.
Yeah.
Cross line is 3 feet.
Yeah, 50 inches is
Three and a
minimum, I
half.
think, right?
Yeah, there we
We're at 3 feet here.
Oh, yeah.
I figured. I figured we'd be deeper.
In New York, it's 3 feet.
Yeah.
It may actually be deeper here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that was like 50. So.
you're gonna have an issue with frost heave if you don't leave a gap.
Yeah. So expansion joint, nothing connected.
The other thing which you may want to think about is, and this gets into construction, has nothing to do with it. You know, some flashing at the top, so you don't get watered down, because then your rebar is gonna rust.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what kind of rebar are you using? Is it just regular or
Yeah, 5/8.
epoxy coated or?
I'm not opposed to epoxy coated.
Well, because obviously both sides are exposed to water.
I mean, I could. Here's the thing. This is why I'm glad I came in front of you guys, because I'm kind of new, because you have more sort of, you know, institutional knowledge of the village. I was looking for something that was simplistic and not brutish, but these houses were not built with.
Worker houses.
I mean, they're not super fancy, and so I mean, if there's some other, I mean, I would not be opposed at all to adding like a nice 3/8 inch little overhang on the top of those soldier courses. If that's gonna help. Flashing, I mean, I would obviously, I'm not gonna put weeps and a bunch of other sort of just general constructability components into this. And there actually will be a few more soldier courses coming up there in terms of the CMU layout in the center of this thing. But I'd be I'd be happy to do, you know, like a little drip edge to extend that stuff out a half, but I don't know if that gets, maybe feels a little overdone, you know?
I don't think so.
I can put flashing in, 100%, if that's gonna solve the problem, 'cause
Well, and that's really a constructability issue, and it becomes a question of how long it'll last.
trust
Yeah,
me,
or
I
when
wish
you
my
have-
house had more flashing.
Right.
It doesn't have flashing, so
Wouldn't
I
you
don't
have
wanna, like,
to
introduce that
replace the
detail.
flashing, you know, I mean, wouldn't it be easier to just do a permanent drip edge?
I mean, I could incorporate I could do
Well,
copper.
But see, I think even a drip edge, let's say you have a half-inch drip edge, I mean, you know,
It's gonna
basically.
roll, 100%.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, all of this, and when it rains, all of this is gonna get wet. which
What would you
means,
like to do?
I mean, there's no flashing on the rest of the house. I know that flashing is gonna, you know, obviously extend the lifespan of the wall. Nothing lasts for forever. I can add a nice copper deco there and turn green over time and kind of blend in. I mean, I'm totally fine doing that. I just didn't want to add something that was so out of the box.
No, I don't think
Out of the
it's out of the
gate.
box.
But,
And in order to get this soldier coursing, what you're talking about is one full brick and then a half brick, right?
yep, it's like 3/4 of one brick, and then I would reverse the pattern as I go
Right,
along.
alternate it as you're
Yep,
going
it
down.
was tiny little pitch, not a ton of pitch, but a ton.
No. Yeah, any pitch would help.
Yeah.
Just,
I don't feel strongly one way or the other.
I don't either.
Drip, no drip, copper, no copper. I like the very simple design. I think it sits well with the surrounding structures. I'm cool with it.
the other thing you may wanna think about is perhaps a water barrel.
You know, I actually talked to I talked to Glenwood and I reached out to Cornell about our compost situation and the rain barrel. They said New York State, 100% rain barrel. And I talked to our buddies up at the best store ever, EPS, and they said, sure, rain barrel, why don't I just raise this up in the back of my raised bed garden, run that leader back there, and then grab up all that water and get it off of, Stone Street has tons of water problems, so if I can get that to the backyard, if you guys are okay with that, I was gonna do that back in my pine tree area. So,
That's
yeah.
not a permanent,
Yeah.
rain barrel's not a permanent
Yeah.
installation, we don't have.
So I measured it out, I do have the pitch to do it, to get that water all the way to the back, and then I would just
That's
backfeed it into the garden beds.
Nice,
Talking 2-year plan here, but I'm just,
we're all familiar with multi-year plans. Is there anything else we need to go over?
I have no other
Well,
question.
did we do a secret vote?
Not yet.
All right, do I have a motion concerning secret?
It is a type 2
And I'll second that.
alteration.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Do I have a motion on the application as submitted?
I'll move that.
I'll second.
All right. Sean?
Aye.
So just for clarity, are we allowing Travis to, as he designs, determine if he wants to do a slight overhang?
the drip edge, in my opinion, with a small kicker, is better than the overhang.
I just wanted to be clear to make sure we know what we're voting
I don't
on.
wanna be obstinate, I'm with you guys 100% on both points. I do believe if the drip edge isn't too much ornamentation with you
I
guys,
think it
I
would
do
be.
think it's a better detail
too.
constructability
Mhm.
wise.
I do too.
Well, it's permanent, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure that we're
I have
recording
no-
correctly.
Yeah, I have no objection to that.
And I'll do the epoxy too, I mean, I appreciate the advice.
So essentially, this is going to extend how much? Or,
You talking about a corbel or drip edge?
I think we're talking about
Corbel
either,
at the top course.
I think we're
and putting
talking
a
about
drip
either
edge on it?
the option of either corbel at the top course, like
Mhm.
3/8 to a half. I mean, at a certain point, it just starts to become static and roll back. Or adding like a small, I could bend up some copper. I could insert that, and I could do like just a small
But
little.
it wouldn't be a wall through, it wouldn't be a through wall.
No, I would just insert it in
Mortar.
those two more courses there.
Have you,
you wanna say that again?
Well, I could either corbel the top of the brick so
Yeah,
that it's sitting slightly
that.
over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know which is well,
something like that.
yeah. Or we could not corbel it and I could just add a small piece of copper flashing.
Well, I mean, if you're gonna do flashing, where you should put it is really under the coping.
Yeah, agreed. Under that social course, so I could
Yeah.
pick
my-
that out.
my
There's just, there's
feeling.
no, that detail doesn't exist anywhere else in the house. I agree that it's a good detail.
Well, I think the flashing should be here now, whether it projects beyond the brick or not. I don't think that that's critical, because basically what you're trying to do is just keep water from, because once it gets into the block, the block,
Just creates a highway.
you wanna just divert the water to the face.
100% agreed.
Yeah, and so you don't even have to, the flashing wouldn't even have to show. I mean, usually from what I've seen, it's kind of sticks out a little bit and then has a down leg.
Yeah, I could do that too. I could just basically wrap the top of that to keep the CMU completely embedded, and then I could just make that kicker there.
As the mover of the motion, I am fine with all of the options and happy to, given that it's an ancillary structure not connected to the building in the backyard, and the three solutions are all
Acceptable.
aesthetically appropriate,
Yeah.
I'm fine with allowing you the flexibility to decide when you're building.
Well, I appreciate the conversation, to take your point, and I think that this does the maximum, this yields the maximum benefit from a constructability standpoint, and it's also the least visual.
Right.
So I mean, that kind of answers all the.
All right.
You know, I
Well,
would
then also you have a lot of leeways because you're talking about cutting, one brick is gonna be full and then you gotta cut the other one, so you can establish whatever that is. And, that gives you some flexibility, you can make this as wide as you want
Oh
it.
yeah, I will, elasticity there on top, sure.
While you're working with historic brick, I heard recently that the Rosedale Quarry is being reopened for making Rosedale mortar again. I know Donald McDonald is speccing it for a project. It's obviously a softer mortar. That,
Tough.
well, softer so that it will move with the brick and not split the bricks apart. You're gonna want a softer mortar to protect those older bricks. So that may be something that you wanna look into too, is,
Will do.
I mean, it was made to work with Hudson Valley Stone and Hudson Valley Brick.
Very cool.
Okay, so as far as the application that we're gonna include,
Got it.
some sort of overhang, a little bit of an overhang at the top, at the coping.
Hand it in.
So I'm talking about nothing more than a half an inch?
That I don't think is critical, I mean.
I'm only saying
whatever-
half an inch because the lentils in the house are half an inch from the existing brick.
Okay,
So I'm not a designer.
The mason's folding rule,
Yeah.
the thickness of that is set up as a corbel. That's
Yeah,
the standard
so I mean,
corbel,
that's,
so you
we're
put the
talking like
thick and
a
that's
heavy half or
inch,
like, right, yeah. So I mean,
Can we just giggle for a moment that you said lentil and probably didn't even realize it?
we're on the lintel?
You said lentil.
Lentil?
Just throwing in a little
You
humor
can't
there.
trust me after I've been hanging out with gin and tonic.
Right, we good?
okay, so,
Wonderful.
we have a motion and it was seconded for this, right?
Yes, Carolyn said it.
Okay, and John, yes? Yes,
Aye.
yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Great, awesome, thank you so much for the input.
Thank you.
Do you have
Appreciate
an
everyone's
attorney
time.
here? Do you wanna shift the 35 stuff up ahead of your 14? I didn't even
Since
have.
I'm a lay
Put them-
person
I put your stuff on the agenda
here,
first, not
is there
realizing you
anything
had a
else
ton
I
of
would
people here.
need other than, I guess,
Is there any what?
Jeff will reach out
Anything
to
you
say
need
you have a permit.
Oh, so
right?
Jeff will get in contact with you and he'll just issue you, your certificate
Oh,
of
you're not here for that
appropriateness
too?
and your permit from the building
Well, you
inspector.
decide whether
And
you
Gotcha.
want.
now
Now
that we
that
have
or
an awesome
paying
organized
their bills,
building
so.
inspector, he's
It's a good thing.
pretty quick to get these things processed.
So the only thing, and I don't wanna digress into more Paul's time, I was looking at that, it's interesting because this is not I'm not building a structure here per se, so the inspection schedule, as I read it on the website, it's like, it's mostly post-construction.
Oh,
So
yeah. Yeah.
And for something like this, should I call the inspector to
I
inspect my
think he's just gonna
footing?
email you,
He's gonna walk by and be like, "What's good? Good job, guy."
hopefully.
I don't wanna. I mean,
think-
he's obviously super busy. I'm not trying to bother the guy, but I don't wanna, step on his
I
toes.
think you're gonna have to get a permit only because there is a structural element to this.
Mhm.
It is a 4-foot high wall, sitting on a footing, so I think that the, building inspector would probably wanna have to review that. You know. I think, for example, you're gonna have to identify the size of the rebar and how often, and some things like that.
The process is not as much quicker than it used to be for getting permits
great.
and stuff out, so you should be good for spring season.
Oh, I was gonna say we want to build this, so I'll just reach out to him and ask him, I'll come up with some sort of a schedule with him.
Yep.
After I get you guys referral. Great,
Cool.
thanks so
Good
much
night.
for your time.
Thanks, guys. So just so I can pull the right photograph, which thing do you wanna address first?
You know, if the owner is coming and
Okay, so Pete Farrell's not coming, right?
do you wanna do the fence?
Oh,
and
okay.
then we could
Right.
switch the order,
Okay.
could we do the fence
First,
for Market first and then the other two
and
after
then the
that?
lighting after that?
Yeah, if that's okay,
And-
and that way
canopy.
Adrian can get home a little earlier.
Put this one behind you.
Alright.
So which,
So now we're at 14 Stone Street,
okay,
as it was on the agenda, the fence. Just changing the cast of characters slightly.
It's a Stone Street activity.
Anybody want the application?
It's in there.
I just want it recorded on record that Sean said yes.
No, 13 sounds good.
Tonight?
No,
We just got a referral for it, yeah. Yeah, we just got a referral for the property across the street. So it's your blocks
Mhm. Stone
season,
Street,
apparently.
season, right.
Yes, it's Stone Street now at HDRB.
Okay. Walk us through it.
Okay, so, the fence has been up, since presumably the late sixties, that's what our neighbor, former neighbor said, when Montrestelle put it up. The posts were cast into concrete, I think you can see that in this photograph. So, and I have replaced, 2 of the posts, by literally fabricating them because they don't come that size and that shape anymore. There's a similar shape, but they don't match the height after the indent. And that certainly worked in a temporary way, but the whole thing has so many fasteners to keep it together that they ultimately failed and the fence is falling down, so it's time to replace it. And we're gonna have to reuse those holes, the existing holes in the concrete, because there's no option to do anything else. You can't just like attach to the top of the concrete and expect the post to stay up. The intention was also, we had have a permanent easement that goes all the way back now on the side of the shed. So this fence ended before at the southwest corner of the shed. It's gonna carry right the way back to the property line in the back.
Cause you're over the neighbor's line? What's the easement?
No, the easement, when we, originally, when we bought the house, there was an easement that went up to the end of the driveway with our neighbor. There's a term for that kind of easement, but it's a forever
Oh, right.
easement. And then, because the fence, the retaining wall and fence were put up in a time when, neighbors did different things, right?
Uh-huh.
So now that wall continues right the way back, and if you see in this one drawing, there's a fence post that's dashed in.
Yep.
So that's where the fence currently ends. But we purchased an easement from our neighbors
Oh, here, yeah.
at 12, and so now we have the ability to go all the way back and build a fence, which we all wanna do because we all have dogs and.
Yeah, got it.
So that's the only extension to the fence, which means that we're also, extending the retaining wall to accept those 2 new posts.
I'm sorry, where's the dash?
Sure, this guy right here.
Just the video.
That.
That's where the last post is, so,
Got it.
and I can tell you that there's no consistency about space between the posts, so that every length of fence will be unique. And I have to like adjust the spacing of the alternating fence. And because I had already fabricated 2 of these posts, I was hoping to reuse those in their current location. So there are 2 posts that are existing, the other posts are gonna have to be new. It's not just a simple matter of putting a post in a previous hole, because actually all of them are notched around rebar and cast and stuff, so it's a pretty elaborate mortise and survey system to make each post, because each one is different. So I just assume not have to do that again.
So the existing posts are this height, you have 2 new ones, or you have 1 new
No.
one that you had fabricated or replaced,
Two
and you wanna have the
I
rest
fabricated,
match.
and the other ones we wanna have matched, so there are 6 that would have to be also matched.
Oh, I see. And this little ghosted post,
That's the one that.
that's just showing the
that's-
depth, but
That's
that's
showing the one that would come out,
coming out.
because
Okay.
that's where that fence ended, and then it turned and made a right angle
Right, right, right. I see.
back to the shed.
So these, just so I'm clear, so this fence post, you
So-
fabricated
So
to
this was a new
match.
one,
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, yeah.
that's the new one, these are the old ones.
I see.
So I fabricated to match
I
those.
know, I have this.
I'm taking one that was in the most, in the best condition.
I have a similarly wacky concrete situation than you in there.
And it looks like the panels are going to be roughly what you have now, without the fancy X's on the top.
They're gonna be the same, it's gonna be
The same kind of
that's-
pan,
yeah.
alternating panel.
Yeah.
And is it,
Without
and
the
the,
X on top of that, X is a real problem, I mean, it's the,
Yeah,
neighbor
constant.
kids like to take them out. And-
Have you talked to the zoning board about the height of the fence?
No, because we try to go through the regular process, we had referred to them, we were just referred to you. But Kathleen had a conversation apparently with them.
Well, I asked the question of Jeff because you're above 4 foot on the posts.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure that when we're clear with you, when we approve your fence, that you're not then gonna get called back in.
Right, I don't want to either, so what I'd
But
like to do
it's a
actually.
different, the situation as you describe it though, they're not new posts, so that may change the situation, I don't know. But you know what I mean, you're using existing,
Right,
you're working from existing posts,
Well, 2 existing
2
posts.
existing posts.
Well, I guess the issue is that the fence itself is 4'3" 3/4",
Mhm. So that's
which
already
is,
over.
which is already over 4 foot.
Mhm.
Well, that's for zoning board, not for us.
Well, the fact is, it's over 4 feet.
No, yes, I'm just
Yeah.
saying, we can look at the design, but they're gonna need to look at the height.
okay, so let's kind of put that aside for a minute. I took a photograph, once I got your email.
Yeah.
And one of the old posts I took out, I cut it off, and I put it at 4 feet and clamped it to the existing post so that you can see what that difference is. It does make quite a difference in
Yeah.
terms of feeling like because there is also a 2-foot drop on the other side as well, as Travis was saying, the Stone Street steps down.
Right.
Mm.
So that means that this feels quite low. When you put the top of the post at 4 feet, and then you have the fence below that, that's a really low fence. So maybe we would have to change design, however, and what I did too is I made a different drawing. The only drawing that's different on this sheet is this drawing here, showing that once we drop it down, we would take out this intermediate horizontal, because this is now like 2 feet between these, 2'3" or something between them. It's not a lot of distance. So
Well,
I'm happy, I'm not gonna spend, $1,200 to go through the ZBA process to get a fence approved because it's an existing fence. I'm just not gonna spend the time and the money for that. So if it comes up with the ZBA and they have an objection to it, can we do this? That would be my question. I didn't wanna have to redraw the whole
Can
thing.
you do the shorter version?
The shorter version.
Yeah.
It's not the preference, that's for sure, but I don't wanna come back here again. I don't wanna have to go through ZBA.
I don't have any
So,
hesitation about
No.
the design.
what's,
Yeah,
but
one
what's
is
the
just shorter
height of the
version of the
panel
same
end up
thing.
being in the shorter version?
it ends up being, off the ground, it ends up being 3'5" 1/4".
Is that still a legal
Oh, yeah.
guardrail if it's
Yeah.
over a? Okay.
I mean, the question is whether the newel post on the post is included in the 4 foot height limitations.
And the response was that the the code does not differentiate between post and panel.
Well, let them decide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I
Let's
guess what
just
I'm
talk
saying
about,
is I
let's
would
just
like.
talk about the design rather than, you know,
Yeah,
Zoning,
What
logging
is-
that to
what
death.
is-
zoning that nonsense.
All right, do I have a motion, seeker?
Type 2.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Do I have a motion on the fence pending, or contingent on, any zoning issues that may come up?
Are you looking to approve, the design is the same at two different heights, are you looking to approve the fence at 2 heights so that the applicant has the flexibility to go forward based on outcome?
Yeah,
Okay, so I will make that motion.
I'll second it.
okay. John,
Aye.
I
am in favor.
you are in
Aye.
favor?
Yes.
Andrea?
I seconded.
And no,
Padilla, are
okay.
you in favor?
Oh, yes, yes.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Now, the only thing is that I do need the sketch that you prepared showing the other alternative.
I just didn't change, I only changed that. I didn't
Okay.
change
But we
all
have
of it,
that
because
for sure.
It's a pretty complicated.
Yeah.
And you can
That
have
makes
those
it dead
two.
end.
You can have those
All
two
right.
if you'd like.
Can you drop off 2 more copies of these? Or actually, all right.
You
want
can
to
mark,
see a
you can
picture?
mark up, you can mark up
I'm
the
just
other.
gonna offer to make a photocopy.
I know exactly, here, give me the
Should
photograph,
I
I'll
erase the,
copy the photograph.
should I erase the red line?
You need the red line, right?
I can-
No.
It's just the other drawings are not consistent with that. That's the only-
Fine.
Boy, it's been a long time since I've done that.
Where is this beautiful Gothic
I do it every day.
ancillary buildings shed? That must be on Church Street.
That's the back of the former,
Another funeral home?
yeah, there was a.
Oh,
No.
it's the back
Oh,
of,
that's-
There were
it's the
so
back of
many.
Oh, that's the
On
same one.
Fair Street, the,
Kent's Carriage House.
Oh, it's
yes, the
no,
carriage house.
I was thinking
Yes, that
this
is the
looks
one-
just like Kent's carriage house, and I was.
It is Ken's
I
carriage.
thought, oh wow, we have another.
You just
Oh.
didn't get the back of the
projects into.
Okay, this is just at a weird angle. Okay,
Well,
that's
it
so
projects
that's
beyond the
really
fence line.
confusing. That's
So the
really
previous owner, the
Got
owner,
it.
when we moved in,
Oh.
actually sold that piece of land to the owner who was
Oh, weird.
projecting, I think, the 4 feet into the
Okay.
backyard.
That's why I was confused about. Oh wow, I never noticed that shed, and it's huge.
Right.
Okay.
All right, so
Got
we'll
it.
drop off 2 more copies of this.
Yeah, my backyard has unfinished fence with pipes embedded in the concrete.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
It has a very sort
that's
of
gonna
like
be
That's always a good
fun
detail.
Brazilian
trashy industrial look.
modernist garden.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
It's nice. Every time I'm out there weeding, I'm like, what's the point? Got
I
pipes.
feel like it's sort of like
Little
kind of fun
brutalist.
Miami vibes.
Ugh.
But you're gonna stay.
I can stay, yeah, because I have to do the.
What?
Hi. Good to see you.
Oh, hi. I'm sorry that I don't remember your name, I'm Kathleen.
Adrian.
Adrian,
Adrian.
nice to see you, I should say.
And have you met Richard Croft, the owner?
No, I'm your wife, good to see you. I'm Kathleen. Carolyn,
Hello.
Hello.
Al, Andrea, and Sean. Okay, so Al, this is,
This is the one
This
for
is the fence.
9:45.
Gotcha.
28:35.
this is the referral for the fence, and you'll know, it's an addendum to the previous application. So we continued, it's not a new application, we continued the previous application. This one.
You just give me kind of a brief overview since we haven't been here for a couple months, or, yeah.
Maybe I'll
And I'll do that, and then Adrian can really get into the details and what has changed from the last application. But the real, need for the fence is, couple-fold, is that, crops have a lot of people wandering onto their property, and it's just as tourism has increased, there's just more and more people wandering on their pier. So there's, 3 fence types. One at the southern driveway, which is really to sort of distinguish it as a residential property across from all the parking at Metro North. And then there's the mesh fence between the cottage and the driveway, the southern driveway, which is meant to be, a buffer to the people wandering onto the property, but to, really let that landscape be the dominant feature, as well as the cottage, which is, so it really has a presence on the street front. And then at the northern driveway and courtyard area, a wooden gate for privacy. And we're really trying to unify all these distinct buildings. The main one, which was built as a contemporary structure in 2005, and something that, almost sort of is in the background that can provide privacy, but not be fighting with all the different styles that are on the site. And that's about it. You can
That's great.
get into the details.
And I just want to reiterate kind of the point you made about the fencing really not wanting to have a big presence on the street here, and that the proposal that we've developed is really about keeping kind of that rugged landscape. There's a lot of topography out there. It's actually very beautiful. It looks park-like. I think that's part of the issue for visitors constantly coming onto the property. It has a park-like quality to that landscape, and we want to keep that piece of it. There's also worth noting 2 drive entries onto it, where we have our two gates. The southern entry is really the one that will be used by vehicles most of the time. The northern entry is really becoming more of a pedestrian entrance. There'll be a terrace, kind of almost a outdoor living room really, for the family just behind that gate. It will accommodate, if there's a delivery and you needed to get a larger truck into that yard, the gate would open for that purpose. But essentially, behind that area is where there's lots of living going on. We've made some modifications since the last time we were here, and I wanted to walk you kind of through that, and hopefully we brought some additional material that better explains the proposals. Starting with kind of on the next page, this is a photo from yesterday, and looking at the northern entry. On the left is the cottage, and on the right is the garage itself. We actually kind of mocked up the height of the current proposal for the fencing back there, so that piece of tape you see stretched across the driveway is kind of the height that I'll talk about in a moment. But I also wanted to just mention on plan, it doesn't read so well, but this fence is set quite a bit back from the road. It's set back behind that really large red oak tree that's in the front. And that oak is kind of on a mound itself. So the grade behind the oak tree where the fence is another foot lower.
Could I interrupt you for a second? I actually went down this afternoon to the site. The sun was really bright, so it was hard to get photographs, but I took pictures from the other angle. So you get I think it's easier to read on the site. So if folks have the opportunity to go down, it's easier to read how it steps back and relates to the tree and the structure from further up. I mean, that's not necessarily as visible from the public right of way, that portion where the fence jogs,
Right.
but it does help you understand how you're getting back to that building. So I'll pass around my
Right.
phone.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment, but there's about 12 inches of grade change from the elevation where the fence is touching the cottage and where it's touching the garage, and the top of the fence is level. So the fence is 12 inches shorter at the cottage, so it's a smaller scale. And there's an elevation that will explain that, that I'll go into in a little bit more detail. This was the rendering that we showed at the very first meeting. This was the this rendering shows the proposal with these, at this point it was a fully opaque 6 foot tall wood fence there, stepping back. It's helpful, but not as helpful as seeing the mock-up and understanding the depth and just how far off the road this fencing is. The next sheet shows the proposal at that original meeting, where it's a 6 foot tall fence, and it'd be essentially completely solid wood. We came back in November and made some revisions that made it a more, a less opaque, where we've opened up the joints. And you'll see on that southern entry gate, we did a similar treatment so that you would see light and movement back there. I think there was still concerns about the presence that this fence had as well, and thinking about ways that it could be made lighter. And we then are proposing today actually reducing the height of that fence as well. And so it would be 5 feet tall, still have the gaps between the boards so that you would see behind it, you would see the light, you would see the air. It's 5 feet tall at the tallest portion of it. Actually, where it's meeting the cottage is closer to 4 feet tall at that location. And that way it has less of a presence. The goal here always has been to really to minimize the presence of the fence. I will also say that the wood portion of the fence is facing the road, and as it steps back, we're using the mesh in between. So it's more transparent than even these elevations show, and that
So where it jogs.
where it jogs, it would be the mesh.
Something that struck me when I was down there today and seeing the height. Because of where you stand as a pedestrian on the street, you know, you're lower than the gate. It feels less fortress-like, I think, than when we were talking about whatever,
The 6
7
feet.
feet, 6 feet.
Yeah.
But it also, interestingly, I think reduces the impact of the contemporary architecture that's there and draws your attention more to the one historic structure, the one rebuilt structure, the two rebuilt structures. So it sort of draws your eye. I thought that it blocked some of that incursion in the district from that from the newer construction.
I didn't get a chance to go down and look myself, but I do think a 5 foot tall fence as opposed to a 6 foot tall fence, even though it's only, you know, it seems pretty minimal, I think it is more consistent with the fence heights that we see throughout the village, because most of our experience as pedestrians is walking around the village and being able to see over the fences, and I'm a short person, so there are plenty of fences I can't see over, but a 6 foot fence, it's more monolithic. And I think 5 foot fence is much more in conversation with what we see around the village.
But it's sort of, you can see back.
Yeah, you can see the landscape, you can see
And
the
it
yard,
also
which is
provides some screening to
Right.
that.
Right, it
critical-
removes that main residence a bit from the presence on the street, which
yeah.
is kind of.
Throughout the village, you see the houses, you see the yards. There's barriers, we need them.
All right, I guess the question is that 5 foot still taller than 4 foot?
Right.
Isn't the 4 foot the zoning ordinance?
This is in the B1 district.
Yeah, they're near the train tracks.
But isn't that between B1 and other residential?
Good question. No, you're right. It is 4 feet generally, except between B1 and residential zoning.
Yeah.
Again, this went to the, it was not referred to zoning, so they've seen it at 6 feet, and it was not referred to zoning, so
But that's all B one, right?
it is also.
Across the
B1.
street too, so it
Yeah.
is between B one and B one, it's not B one and residential.
Now,
I don't think
you have also on the, you have a modification of garage doors. I'd like to see this fence in the context with the garage doors.
Yes, so, in the original, rendering has the garage doors. We had originally had vertical, and we had gone to a horizontal, so it's more, sympathetic with the fencing, so you don't have too many different things going on, so
Well,
just.
that makes it a little bit less obvious that it's, you know, it's not calling as much attention to itself if it's part of an ensemble. That's all in the same vocabulary. I like the fact that the fence between the garage and the cottage has a little less opacity. It's the 80%, 88% opacity versus what we saw in the first instance. And that it's a reduced height to 5 feet. You know, I still think it's unfriendly, but I don't think unfriendly is really, I think unfriendly is too subjective a term for us to make a decision on.
What is the matter?
You know, I do understand that they want a need for privacy vis-a-vis their children, and that's sort of a play area right behind it. But I contrast that with the fence between the two, not the existing stone, gate posts, but the new gate post that I think that we've all pretty much approved. I don't know whether we've approved those gate posts yet, have we? I think we
No.
have. No, we
No.
haven't.
Oh, you got it.
No, we didn't,
It is B1 all the
in
way.
this case, you know, right adjacent to it, you have, you know, an open iron fence, and so, you know, what does this really conceal? You know, it's,
The gate?
yeah, the gate.
The
And,
lower
and
one.
this is the gate between the two
The
stone.
southern gate you're on now.
Yeah, the
Oh.
southern gate, the one closest to the chapel. You know, since the wall going back from it is not a,
It's just driveway, right?
you know, and there's nothing that prevents people from walking on the chapel's property and looking through, so I mean, having a very opaque thing here, what purpose does that serve when it's completely visible from the
Yeah,
side?
well, because that's open and that's
We
open.
are
Mhm,
planting that edge, that edge is
I
getting
think
planted.
it also.
Planting's fine, we don't count them.
I know, but
I think it also helps unify both driveways, so you have a
Yeah, but
consistent
look at the distance
material.
between both driveways, I mean, you know,
Yeah.
unifying both driveways that are that far apart,
What would
Okay,
your
a couple of
alternative be?
a couple of 100 feet apart.
And I can also say one other thing that I think is helpful is that you have a lot of that iron fencing between, you have it between the chapel and the property, but you also have it at the train track. And it feels like a very municipal feeling there where it's all along the train, so it sort of
Yeah, but the
distinguishes
type
that.
of iron fencing they have at the train track is very different from the one that's next to the chapel. And,
Somewhat.
and, you know, which is a little bit fancier. You know, it's,
Mhm.
you know, what are you preventing people from seeing? A bunch of cars parked there? Cause basically that's your parking area here,
Mhm.
you know? I mean, it's kind of silly to say we need privacy for our cars. You know, is somebody gonna read their license plates? I mean, come on.
it's not so much privacy at 2 points on that. One, it is consistency. Even though they're far apart, it is one property, and understanding that is important. And then, kind of secondly, I think this is probably the big entry point for most people coming off the rail. That you come off the rail station at that point, and having a gate there that is
That
more.
reads more residential
Right.
rather than.
I find that both fences and the gates totally unsympathetic with anything, I mean, how do you feel that this relates to the neighborhood that it's set in?
You know, in the district as a whole.
Right. For me, this property edge is really defined by the landscape topography, the rock outcropping, the cottage.
But it's right next to a national landmark, the
Mhm.
chapel.
Mhm.
So, I mean, the whole point of a historic district is to, you know, to control what is constructed so that it reinforces the overall aesthetic of, as a matter of fact, going through the design standards. We're supposed to reinforce and be sympathetic to the aesthetics of the district.
Right,
Now,
but we're also supposed to not replicate something that there is no historic
I'm not
basis
asking
for.
him to replicate it. You can, there's,
It's, I think the
what
opacity
here,
is the
what
issue.
here even echoes anything? I mean, you know, typically, when you add something to a historic structure, you try and capture some feeling, some elements which would indicate that at least it's all one thought. To me, this, I don't see how any of this really relates to anything. I mean,
I think what I'm gathering from what you and Carolyn are saying is that this gate, unlike all the gates that we look at in the village, this gate is opaque. And we don't have a big opaque gate anywhere else
It's
in the
not
village.
it's not just the
So
opaqueness of
opacity
it.
is an issue.
Opacity. It's, you know, generally when you're trying to echo in a modern design, something that relates to previous eras, you do it with scale, you do it
Right.
with texture, you do it with materials, and this, the opacity of it, the fact that it's like a big wooden board setup, which on the front of the garage is fine, because you
Mhm.
see that in garages, you see that in carriage houses, you know, so it's, you know, there's clearly an evolution from one era to another. This just doesn't have it, this just could have been plunked down anywhere.
Well, maybe another way to think about it, it's such an unusual property in the district because it incorporates multiple structures and it has very contemporary construction alongside reconstructed faithfully reconstructed historic buildings. For me,
Well,
what's
one faithfully sort of reconstructed, I mean, obviously, we did accommodate the fact that the cottage building didn't have ceiling heights
correct.
for normal people today,
Correct.
okay? And we, and
Well,
also
the biggest
had,
thing
and
was
also
the
had running
foundation.
structure,
So
okay?
I did have
So-
a fence point here, excuse me.
Okay. But,
Okay.
and the other building has been so modified that it's,
So what you have on what is now a consolidated property under single ownership is a collection of structures that don't necessarily relate to each other. That there are lots of structures around the village that don't relate to nearby structures. My concern, following a bit of Carolyn's line of thinking, is that I worry that this parcel further separates itself from the rest of the district by becoming more compound-like, right? Having the large gates, which are very suburban in nature. I don't mean the design is not suburban, but I mean the concept of closing out is absolutely out of character with the village. I feel more comfortable in discussing, because of the points that Carolyn made and because of my site visit, I feel more comfortable about the gate configuration between the two structures, and I think that reinforcing it with the horizontals on the garage helps a lot. This area, to me, already, this gate area is what I'm pointing to. You know, it already is out of character of the village because it reads as sort of a fortress, right? And then to close it off further, I think gives the feeling that we are shutting out the rest of the village and shutting out what is a small community. And that's where I stall. I feel much more persuaded about this area. I agree with the sentiments you're making.
No,
here.
I can be persuaded here too, okay? But the steel fencing here and that gate there, the numbers 2 and 3, I don't know. I mean, you know, and then we have we also have to be consistent to the maximum extent possible with the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan basically talks about things like no gated communities. This looks like gated community.
I agree.
I mean, it really and why don't we want gated communities? Because we don't want that exclusionary one.
Right, but that's hard to argue with a single family. That what they mean in
It
the comp plan.
doesn't look like a single family.
What they're
It looks
talking
like a
about in the
compound.
comp plan, though.
But what
is a
happens?
And it's been under
multifamily.
one ownership for generations.
But what happens when, I mean, I just spitballing this idea, what happens when we approve something like that, and yes, it's a single family, but then we have a development like Butterfield, a major development, or condos being built, and now we've set precedent, and they want a gate like that.
I mean, that's a concern.
That's what
that I
I'm worried
have.
about.
Well, there's the precedent thing, but also we'd have to also consider the comprehensive plan in that respect.
So
You wanted to add something.
If that's,
hi.
Can you identify yourself first?
I was about to. Anthony Mirando, I'm an attorney from Cuddy and Fader. I was here a couple months back, helping out with some of the other issues. I think just to step back for a quick second, because I'm not an architect, I'm not a fence designer, so I'm not going to opine on whether or not a fence should have an inch separation between the boards or 3 inches. But I think the initial issue that just came up about the premise for the request is something that I wanted to just point out for a second. There was a discussion about precedent and reference to Butterfield and condos. I think there's a uniqueness about this property that has to be recognized, not just in the sense of its location, which is waterfront, not almost no properties are like this, but its direct location across from the train station at both entrances that we're talking about into this property. And both of them in its current state are inviting to tourists or anybody coming off the train to walk right across the street. So I think when you're talking about setting a precedent, I think the record should reflect the uniqueness of the property, and that going forward, it can be distinguished from other properties.
But unique
I
properties
I
can set a
disagree with
precedent,
you.
that's the problem.
What's that? I'm sorry.
But unique properties can set a precedent, I think that's that's
Well-
what we're not saying that this isn't a beautiful, elegant
And there's
design. We're not arguing about that.
How do you handle the
We're-
security, liability, and safety aspect of this without
That's not under
allowing?
our purview.
No, but neither is rejecting the
Listen,
fence outright.
First of all,
We're not rejecting it outright, actually. Okay,
First
we
of-
haven't rejected it anyway.
First of all, it's not that unique, because all along the entire riverfront, you have riverfront properties. People
Across
who
from the
live
train
next
station.
door have exactly the same situation. And I don't see them coming in and putting up essentially a barricade to keep people out.
Well, it's not a barricade. It's directly across the street from the train station entrances and exits. So
I mean,
it's,
Al, we have
it's location.
escorted people off the pier. People go down to the pier and feel like.
and there's been an effort made.
How do
I
they
mean, it's
get?
really, they walk in. They
Okay.
find their way around. And that's why it can't read that way.
Have gates, have fencing. We're not objecting to the fact, the idea of
That
gates
that's
and
needed,
fencing,
right,
okay?
right.
We're not objecting to the idea of a gate or a fence that is 5 or maybe even 6 feet tall, depending upon what the zoning permits, as long as there is some, as long as there's not that, get the hell out of here, look to it.
Well, that's your
You know.
interpretation of
Well,
what that's
Well,
saying.
that's what it looks
But I
like.
think there's an
I mean,
effort
yeah,
made
but
with the
I-
transparent
Yes,
fencing.
and that's our job. I mean, we're supposed
Yeah, but
to
the
take a look at
the
it.
transparent fencing, we're also looking at purely from a design aspect, okay? The idea of a transparent fencing is much better, because if you're talking about maintaining that fence along the chapel, the one from the stone gates to the,
The
down to the
6-foot one
water,
that comes along the side.
alongside, down to the waterfront, right? I mean, that is fully visible straight through, okay? It is a 6-foot fence, I believe, and I don't think people are climbing over that thing, all right? If they're getting out to the pier, they're probably going right around that thing into the water. all right? Or they're going because there's no gates there and no fencing there, okay? Have fencing, have gates. No problem with having fencing and gates, okay? No problem with these people having security for their property, whatever they do on that property. Whether they have parties all night, I don't care, okay?
It's a fact.
It's just the fact of the matter is, the appearance of the gates, the appearance of the fencing in the historic district has to be complementary to the district, complementary to the way the district has evolved. And we have modern fences that are in materials that are like old fences are, and they're not the same design. So
So it's the actual material of the gates,
it's the materials and it's that
of the gates.
and that real wall-like thing. We don't have really high walls, except when they're retaining walls, because the whole village is built on a slope, okay? But between properties, you're not finding 6-foot walls.
People request, so here's another problem we're having, not with the design, but, you know, everyone in this village, I mean, you know, like, I can't go into my backyard without everyone seeing me. We all have this problem. It's unique to this place. So when you bring a design like this to a place like this little tiny village where we're all built on top of each other and we're on this extreme slope, so we're all looking into each other's yards. Everyone would love a 6-foot fence. We would all love a 6-foot fence, but as a community, we decided that's not the look that we want to have. That's not how we live, and that's not how we communicate. And this place is unique. And if we approve this gate, even though it sits within a piece of our zoning that's a little different from a lot of the village, and we get that, but most of the village doesn't permit a fence even that tall. But now we have, and I understand the need for this gate, I get it. I have people wandering onto my front lawn all the time, dogs pooping, kids, balls, everything, okay? And I'm across the street from a park. I'm totally sympathetic to this. I've had tourists go almost into my backyard to take pictures of the mountain. So we're all sympathetic to this situation, we really are. But we also have a lot of applicants who come to us and they would love a more opaque fence. And again and again and again, we've said no. Because we are following we have you looked at our comprehensive plan and the design standards and all that? I mean, you can see there's many layers of material that this board considers.
Yeah, no, it talks
A
about
lot.
diversity
Sure.
and
Right, so we're not trying to be offensive and get into, for lack of intended, but,
That's
you
good.
know, we have to consider all these things. And so it's just a really complicated application that we're looking at right now. I know it's just a gate, but it's not just a gate.
So for clarity, because I thought that the conversation was going in a direction, we have not heard from everyone yet. I think that the concerns that the three of you have raised are particular for height and opacity to this gate, right? You
Mhm.
don't have the same concerns here? Or
Right.
you do?
Well, opacity and appearance, I mean, to me,
At this, but can we
Well-
confirm we're talking about this
Yeah.
location right now?
Mhm.
well, okay, we can talk about that, but I think that essentially the same thing is true here, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I think the design here has improved,
Yes.
but it's, you know, I can understand having a gate the entire width of this thing. I can understand having a 5 or 6 foot high gate here, all right? I think that the fact that it's so opaque, I think that the opaqueness of it is what gives me that we don't have 6 foot walls in this
Are
village
you
or
referring
5
to
foot walls.
both spots when you're saying that?
Yeah,
I deviate from that opinion a little bit. This gate bothers me a little less because it's right next to these garage doors, so it reads like almost an extension of the garage. That bothers me.
in a way, yeah.
Here's where you get off the train. Here's a major historic property right next door. I think it's just incongruent with everything around it. And it's funny because this is where the neighborhood's happening, but that bothers me less. Over there, it reads just very differently.
So can I ask some context questions? Who is this, the existing 6 foot boundary fence, is that does that belong to the Krupps or to the?
It does belong to the Krupps.
It does, okay. And what is on, just for frame of reference, what's on this side?
Nothing.
There's no fence
No
between
fence between.
this property and
those
the
two
adjacent property?
properties.
Okay.
Vegetation.
Yeah, it's vegetation
And
and
the
the Tachek's property has, both properties have structures that are very
That kind of
close to the
create the
property
little
line.
wall,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
So as far as there being other items around, really, this is the only existing fence on the property.
And
Yes. Well,
I feel like we talked about this before, but I can't remember, I'm sorry, because we haven't seen you since November, I don't remember what the
I was
answer to
absent
the
from
question
this
was.
discussion.
So, the continuation of this style of fence here at the gate and here along the ridge is not under consideration by the applicant?
we looked at it, we went away from it in part because that feels like it's an estate gate. And the comments that you're making about boundaries and not feeling like you're walling off, we agree with that. We are trying not to do that, we're trying to do the opposite here. That wire fence is not meant to have a presence.
Mhm.
We love that it has that park feel. The reason that people wanna come to this property, or they feel that they can go to the property, because it has this kind of democratic public feel to it, we don't wanna lose that.
So it sounds
Um,
like the place that, I'm just trying to work through the conversation a little bit. It sounds like the place, the portion of the application that has the most concern, not the only concern, but the most concern is between the two stone pillars,
Yeah.
right? And what ends up being there. Is your client open to the possibility of a gate that is more in keeping with the boundary fence that's there? A gate that can be seen through, but I mean, this gate, it's not, obviously, it's not in the style of anything else that,
Yeah.
you've taken a design direction that's not like this, right?
Mhm.
But these relate to the primary structure. This is sort of a fancier version of the simple fence that runs along here.
It's the
Has-
same fence, actually.
It is? I don't
Yes.
remember that level of detail over here.
Yeah, it's
So,
the same.
so is there contemplation of leaving this? I mean, you can see through this. It's a gate. It feels less like Cold Spring, but it also reaches the goals of what we've been talking about. It's transparent.
I think also one issue with these big stone pillars
Uh-huh.
is right next to them, you have these really elegant granite pillars for the chapel,
Right.
which get,
Right.
your eye goes to these, which are not,
Yeah.
they're contemporary, they're not very nicely done.
Right, right.
So if part of it was to let those, two granite piers at the chapel be more prevalent, have something smaller and back that doesn't really compete with those, because I think these draw your eye in a way that's not necessarily complementary to what's here, which
So,
is a really, really nice.
Yeah.
so how far back are you moving from where the gate is now?
Oh, they're pretty close.
They're close, but they're so much smaller, so you don't
So
see
they're not
granite
the object,
themselves.
They
they're
don't
not the
have
object that they
the
are now.
presence.
Less estate-like.
You
Yeah,
have
and I
another-
did think that the new pillars really contribute to the sleekness of the design. I guess to Kathleen's point though, just looking at it in plan, it kind of becomes a little bit of a domino where if they continued using this, sort of wrought iron looking fence on the front and across the gate, then at what point would it naturally turn into the galvanized fence? At the point of the incline?
South of the gate?
But what do you mean south of the
North.
gate?
I'm
North of
sorry,
the gate.
north of the gate? I'm not making that as a
Well, no, I
proposition,
guess I'm just saying if we're talking through this because what I like about this design is that the modern elements that are being incorporated into the space are there are few of them. There's basically the galvanized steel and the wood. And that's kind of those are the two new things that are being added into the space. Creating a lot of additional new materials, I'm less enthusiastic about, but I understand the view of my colleagues that it's a little foreboding. I mean, this to me is much more gated
Yeah.
community than this.
Oh, it's
This
silly
to
and it doesn't
me
work with
is
this
like
architecture.
where they hide the tractors at a botanical garden or something, just so you don't look into it. Like it doesn't scream to me that this is like a suburban wall. So if
Or you put the dumpsters behind there.
well, I mean, I think this is something that we're more used to seeing as just being a screen
Something that's trying to
from
hide
something you don't want to look at, and
I mean, I can,
this
yeah.
is.
I totally understand why they want to remove that.
This
It's
is
incongruent
like-
with the
yeah.
architecture. It's
Well, I
Yeah, but
wasn't
that's
advocating to
more
keep
in
it,
keeping
sorry.
with
No, I know you weren't advocating to keep it, but what I'm saying is, what is I guess, this fencing, this galvanized fencing, I mean, there's really no way that this can be made into a gate. It would be impractical, you know?
right.
So if we are in agreement, or most of us are in agreement that the horizontal wood is appropriate in this part of the property.
Well, because there's garage doors there that it's
Right, exactly. So we have this
reads like
wood
a
element
continuation
here.
of the garage.
We will have this galvanized, assuming it's approved, this galvanized steel element here, and then we still need to put a gate here.
Well, you know what else? It's super tough to think about what you would do as an alternative to unify. It is a property under single ownership. It has multiple structures of different styles and designs. And, there's sort of a lot about it that is out of character with the village already. And so how do you incorporate elements together and have it live comfortably in the village? And there's part of me that thinks really a clean, simple, contemporary design is really the only way that you can unify those pieces. Can you imagine putting when we think about this fences around the village, putting a wooden picket.
No,
Adrian had an idea.
let me ask you a question.
I wouldn't think
We're
of a
never
wooden
gonna
ticket
hear
here.
Let
You just
let me
gotta
ask you a question.
Jump in.
Let me ask you a question. You said that, most of the structures are out of character with the village.
No, I did not say that.
Then what'd you say?
I said that there are structures of different designs.
Right?
The largest of which, in my head I said, the largest of which is out of character, right? So
Well,
the
the largest
big
one-
elephant on the site is the large construction
I
that's
know,
not
but the
compatible.
largest one is the one which drapes down the slope on the other side. It's of all of these things, which are the most visible?
Well, it depends on which public right of way you're
Well,
talking
I'm
I
about.
was
talking
gonna
about from
say,
the
if you're on the
sidewalk.
Yeah, but
I'm talking about from the sidewalk.
But it says in the code that it's supposed to be the primary structure, and there's no doubt that the other
It doesn't
structures
say
are
that in the
secondary.
code.
It does, it says the primary
It says
structure.
in the design
Yeah,
guidelines.
it
So
says in the
guidelines,
design,
it
okay.
asks for that. It
But the
asks
thing is,
specifically
the-
for
the-
related to the primary
My
structure.
objection, and I've seen a lot of applications, where they've had different structures of different styles on one site. And usually what they do is they pick one, and they say, okay, we're trying to tie it together
So which would
because
you
we're.
pick?
Well, I'm not the applicant. I mean, what I'm saying is that of all of the options, this doesn't really match anything there.
Well, but
It
it
matches
also,
the doors, the
but it's
garage doors, which are gonna
contemporary.
be changed.
it's contemporary architecture, and it's
But it's in a
new-
historic district.
I understand that, but it's new material that's being added to
Okay,
a
but
site,
it's,
but it's out. It's new material which is being added to a site, and the site itself is in flux. And we know that the newest of these three buildings is also something that the applicant is working on and tinkering with. I don't want necessarily the newest material added to the site to relate to this building if this building is going to be changing as well. I think it should be a beautiful piece of material
I think if
But
anybody.
that doesn't detract from the overall site. You can't say that this wooden fence over here detracts from a building which is set in front of it.
I think
But
that.
it's right next to it.
Yeah,
It's-
it's right next to it.
Right, but
I think if
it's
you were
not
to ask, I think if you were,
obscuring it.
I think if you were to ask 100 people who either walk or drive down that street on a regular basis, what buildings on that street really do you remember the most? One is gonna be the Board and Batten Cottage, and the other one is gonna be the chapel, right? The garage building, I think a lot of people would hardly, oh, there's a garage there? Oh, yeah, there's a garage there, right? This building here, they probably don't even know it's there, all right? And secondly, I lost my second thought, I'm sorry, it'll come back to me.
Well, and this new structure is actually shielded by this garage to a large extent. I mean,
Well, and that gate is set back, like, I think it's only this gate that's an issue, that seems
no,
to,
I-
and it's staggered, so it's broken up, it's not
yeah, but the
monolithic
thing is that
one.
when you talk about a compound, that's what that looks like.
That has
I
a
mean,
question
all
about.
you really need to do is have a couple of guardhouses out front and,
So we lowered that
Yeah,
quite a
that's
bit.
and,
You go
but
too far.
could we actually open up that gate by
That's
the
what I was just
driveway,
wondering.
so you have more space between
what I
the
was gonna
boards
propose.
and it's more,
I would love to hear you.
more open? And I think, you know, it could relate to this, but this, you could have that one
Significantly more.
significantly more open.
It's not
so
about
And you're
see
using-
through.
you're using the
earlier
vocabulary.
point.
You're keeping a
Yeah.
consistent vocabulary, but you're
Yeah.
making it more transparent.
Okay.
I think that, I think that if we were to approve both of these gates, we would be hearing from the general public, what the hell were you thinking? And other people want, hey, how come I couldn't get a gate like that? It's just, I think those gates are just,
The general public is more than welcome to attend our meetings, and they never do.
And they never do.
no, but they do see what happens after our meetings, they do see what gets built.
But this is by the train tracks, which is different from most properties.
I mean, there are.
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of residential buildings here and here and here and here and
Right.
here that are all by the train tracks.
The
They
gate,
don't read like.
And the
as a
other,
matter
and
of
the
fact.
other side of the train tracks as well.
As a matter of fact, you've got a house right over here who they had a real problem because this was a parking lot and people's headlights were shining into their house. And, I didn't, they actually came up and they had an application for a fence and we, talked about how high it could be and everything else. And what he did was, he said, fine, he didn't build a fence, he planted some,
arborvitae.
right.
As
And,
everyone.
that's the way he handled it, but he didn't put in any, permanent structure.
Mhm.
So this is not that unusual in how people are dealing with this.
But that was different. That wasn't a security issue. That was a light issue. Their problem was with headlights. It wasn't with
Water access.
people trying to.
I know, but
think
what,
And
what
people
is,
will still come down right here and get onto their property anyway.
How would you,
how does this reinforce the district?
Or they'll go through the next door neighbors in this way, I mean, it's,
It features the very elements that you talked about as being memorable in the property, the cottage. That's what people see. This is all about putting the cottage front. I would say, in
I
addition
think
to
the
the cottage,
placement of the fence does that, but I don't think the material of it does that at all.
Can the applicant explain his?
in addition to the cottage, I would say topography, that rugged landscape is also character defining.
Absolutely.
And
very
it
much.
preserves that. To me, those are the two elements. I agree, you don't notice the garage. You walk by, it's there. This proposal sets the wood fence quite far back here at the cottage, steps it even further back at the cottage, does keep transparency, has the mesh fencing way up on that ridge, not on the edge of the ridge. It was chosen to sit back from the ridge. You'll never even be able to see the bottom of it because of its location on grade. This southern gate that we're proposing, we believe should have a language and relate to the gates elsewhere on the property, that this could be thought of as a system. I understand the comment that perhaps this gate, what are you screening with this gate? Not much. And it wasn't as much about screening as it was about creating a cohesive design for this. Why don't, this could easily be a more transparent gate, open up the joints.
Yeah.
Would we even think about lowering it a little bit, make it
Sure.
4.5 feet?
Yeah.
I think it wants to be more than 4, because 4 is actually not terribly difficult to hop, and people are climbing up the ledge to get here,
People climb over
the ledge.
a 4-foot
No,
barrier?
No,
they climb up that ledge.
Well,
I've
I
never
also-
seen that.
but I also
happen.
think at
they're climbing
4
up,
feet-
I
Here.
can climb up that ledge and
For
I'm
the
7 years
width,
old.
the width of this gate at 4 feet, it would look very strange. It would look like a
Oh, I agree,
toll booth.
but I don't think people are climbing over 4-foot fences. I don't know if it's-
But if we brought it down a little bit, if you thought the height, or maybe it's just a transparency issue, we could
Look,
open it
I've
up.
warmed up to the galvanized and steel fence,
Yeah.
okay? And where it is, and if there's shrubbery around it to make it even less conspicuous, like, I can deal with this number 2 section here,
How
okay?
tall is your fence?
No
Because
problem
it
with that.
looks
It's,
similar
it's
to
the
this, okay.
gates that,
So can we explore the idea, because I think all three of us at the same time went to open the gate,
Yeah.
open
Sure.
the
Mhm.
spacing.
Yeah.
Is there, to give some guidance, if that is acceptable to the applicant and it resolves some of your issues, does opening the spaces first resolve your design question, or is it more the material itself? What's the,
Opening the
Like-
spaces resolves it for me.
it does for me too.
Then it's more in conversation.
Opening
It
the
doesn't
spaces
for me,
doesn't-
I mean,
the opening the spaces does it for me regarding gate number 1, but
Okay,
not,
but not-
not,
so
not
what-
gate number 3, because gate number 3 is right next to that chapel. You've got the iron fence here. If you have an iron fence here, I don't wanna
I thought
dictate,
that
but
was the gate
an
we were
iron
talking
fence
about.
here in a different design, that's not quite so
or-
jazzy or ornate or whatever that thing was. You know, doesn't have to match the one on the side. Those granite pylons were really nice, and I'd call it a day at that.
Would it make a difference with maintaining the granite, what do you call them?
Pilings.
They're not pilasters, they're
And
poles.
the wood fence,
Oh.
would it make a difference, and I don't know if the topography allows for this, but would it make a difference if the gate number 3 were further back from the street? So that
With the
this,
same with the same gate?
I'm saying, is it the design of the gate and its proximity to the street that's a problem?
It is further,
The only reason why I'm
it is
asking is
closer
just
to the
because.
sidewalk than, I mean, this gate doesn't bother me because it's so far back from the.
Well, but I think that's the distinction Sean is drawing out.
Right.
Is that the distance from the street
Yeah, I'm agreeing with him.
mitigates the impact.
But I don't
Well,
even
it
think it's
mitigates a
necessary.
bit too, and it also just kind of sets it even further back from the. I mean, to me, when I first saw the design of this fence, I found it to be so, not that it's not beautifully designed, but so sort of anonymous and so sort of simple that it wasn't problematic to me at all. I mean, I was more perplexed by the use of this wire fencing than I was by the
Like
design
wire.
of this gate.
Mhm.
And now I've really warmed up to the wire too. But it seems like just such a simple design to me that I didn't have a problem with it. I quite liked it. So my question is, and this is obviously something for the applicant to consider, does it make a difference in your eyes if the gate is set further back along this driveway? I mean, the purpose of the gate is to, allow access to the cars.
I think it's more work. I don't know. Maybe it's more work than it's worth. If those slats had more, light of day in between them, I think it would start to have a conversation with all the picket fences you see all over the village. It would open it up a little, and it wouldn't read as
A wall.
I think in the way that Carolyn, Riley described it, as being a little monolithic and out of character with the rest of the neighborhood, with the rest of the village. I understand all the complicated issues that we're trying to take care of with this gate, but I don't know, to move it to move it back, that's one solution. But I think the easier solution is just to open up those spaces a little bit and let it breathe.
Mhm.
And, as people are walking by, not that they should be peeking through the slats, but I think it wouldn't read as such an, opaque, gate. And it would also relieve the precedent issue that I think we'd be setting if we approved a just big, solid gate that I think, you know, you're rightfully concerned about, and I am too.
I actually think the distance is an important point, because when I went to the site today and looked at the scale and realized the conversation it has with the street is not as direct as in my mind it had been, right? But I was imagining, looking at the drawings, I was imagining it feeling closer to the street.
Mm.
On site, it made a tremendous difference to me to see exactly how far back it would be, and I think that really shifted my thinking about it. And also to see the way it zags around the tree and back to the cottage. It lets the cottage be proud on that sort of knoll. I think shifting the gate back here could have that same kind of impact.
I
I
think-
don't think it's an either or. I think you could opening it some will help, and potentially moving it back would help.
Okay.
I think by moving the gate back, all you're doing is inviting somebody to park in the driveway.
Oh, that's a different
No,
consideration, right?
Well,
No, and trust
Put a
me.
sign on it.
You can
Well,
park there now.
there are signs now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
There's room for
My
a car
neighbor has
there.
one.
There's room for a truck, because I often park there when I'm on a site visit. So,
So you're part of the problem.
yeah.
But
no,
wait, Parking is not
but
under
it's always open, no one else is parking there,
review.
so I don't see
It
that.
could be moved back,
Park
so there's
there.
like a little nook that the ledge forms, you can kind of see it here on the plan.
Yeah.
It could slide back, but it's probably, we're talking 5 feet.
That might be.
But that could make a big difference. It makes a big difference.
And it
At the
also
other end.
allows this sort of corner view of the chapel to be opened. I mean,
Yes.
it's hard to see in this
Right.
photo because it's so tight, but you know, the real sort of issue on this side is it has in a lot of ways less to do with the proximity to the cottage and more to do with the proximity to the chapel.
The chapel.
So
right.
if
And the sidewalk, it's so close to the sidewalk. Gate 1 doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
Gate 3 is the one that's, you know,
Well, and that's the
and at a
location.
tighter part of the driveway too, it could be, you know, just kind of a little bit more hidden by the vegetation and everything else around it. That I'm looking only at it in plan, so I don't know whether that's even possible as far as
The slope.
the slope and everything else and how it's going to
It is.
affect these sections next to it, but
I mean, they're flexible.
yeah, sure.
That's the thing about that. There are multiple things about that existing gate that are out of character with the village, but one of them is one of the ones that makes it feel like a much larger impact is its closeness to the street.
yeah,
So
it's really
I
close
think
to
that
the
moving back
sidewalk.
to if the landscape allows a shift back, I think it would be great.
It's not just like any sidewalk either.
And it
There's
actually
a huge
looks
amount of
like
foot
this-
traffic.
it
so-
actually
Like
looks
not a
like-
sidewalk.
There's no sidewalk.
There's
Yeah.
yeah, right.
This
But the
is
side,
almost.
the sidewalk's on the other side. This
I don't know whether this was some sort of a standard
The foot
size or
traffic.
something, but it's almost wider than it. It's such a extra wide gate
It is
at
an
this
extra wide
particular
gate.
part of the driveway,
Yes.
which looks like it was building the driveway to fit the gate and not building the gate to fit the driveway.
Yeah, we're narrowing actually the drive.
Yeah.
I still, I don't see anything in this gate and